CCU Orlando, Natural Awakenings Magazine, and Unity of Nashville present The Authentic Spiritual Journey, a weekly show featuring real and practical spiritual conversations from diverse perspectives here on the Experience of the Soul podcast channel. Today, episode 62, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Spirituality. And now, your host, Reverend Cynthia Alice Anderson.
Hello and welcome to the Authentic Spiritual Journey. My name is Cynthia Alice, otherwise known as RCA, and I'm here in 818 Studios with my producer.
Hey, my name is Dave Croft. Thank you so much for joining us for today's episode. Hope that you are all doing well today. You're ready for a great month and a great week.
Yes, we've got on our new experienceofthesoul.com shirts today. We're feeling like out and proud with our company shirts.
I have mine. You can't see mine, but I'm wearing.
And you can see like 4 letters of mine probably. So, but anyway, we're working on some t-shirt designs, and that's a lot of fun. This is becoming a real thing, friends, and our show is all over the world. We are thrilled and honored to be a part of your journey. And I actually want to lift up listeners. Dave, did you have one that you were choosing? Because I had something in mind.
No, go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to lift up some listeners in Alabama. I love that, I'm from the deep South. I'm from Georgia, a little town outside Atlanta called Red Oak. And I love when people in the South are inspired and uplifted by this message, because I think everything I do is kind of infused with the upbringing of the South. And of course, there's a big rivals between Georgia and Alabama.
Of course, oh yeah.
But anyway, I have some friends in Alabama, and there are some Unity ministries connecting in with us. So I just honor you and thank you for listening. And every now and then I want to lift up certain states, because it really touches me that you guys are listening and that this lifts you up and that you connect with us.
That's great. I love it. And sometimes, going to different parts of the country can feel like a different culture, different parts of the culture.
I could take you a couple places in Georgia.
Sure, yeah.
Well, you wouldn't think you were going to a different country, but you would say, I just went back 100 years. So that's both the good news and the bad news, I guess. There's more work to be done to raise consciousness. And friends, I've had an epiphany about this whole idea of consciousness. And the goal of this show, we often say, is just to reawaken consciousness to love, acceptance, and peace. And I'm not going to try to go out and get people who are not ready for this message, and they are many. But there are many who are ready for it and willing to wake up and are doing their soul work and striving to live from the heart and soul. And that's who I'm interested in connecting with. So nothing negative about other folks, but I just know if I try to go get people not ready for this message, it's wasted energy. And what I'd rather do is encourage our listeners to share the show, to even financially support the show, so that the work continues and we can reach more people who are in alignment with this message.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a scripture that I'm not exactly sure where it is, but it says, you can't put new wine in an old wineskin.
That's it.
And so sometimes when, especially like if you're really like high on something, you're like, man, this is great and I love it and I want everybody to know it, and you just come and kind of blast them with it,
Right.
they're unprepared for that. And so I think, your soul has to kind of get to a place to where you're receptive to it. Otherwise, you'll just reject it outright.
Exactly.
And so yeah.
Well, and today's an exciting show. What number show are we on? Is it actually 62?
We're 62, yeah.
Show 62. So we're well into the second year. And this also pleases me greatly, because it means that you've been supporting the show, many of you, since the very beginning. And this is a show unlike any others. The title of this show is Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Spirituality. I don't know if you're a Netflix watcher, but Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is a very popular show. And I came into Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. because both my son and then one of my members were talking about their love of the show. And I was kind of surprised that both my son and then somebody in their early 60s, so my son is 12, this congregant member and friend in her early 60s, and they were really connecting about the show. And I thought, I need to watch this. And I often Anyway, when there's a show my son really wants to watch, I will watch it in advance to make sure it's appropriate for his age and everything.
Just to be clear that we're thinking of the same show. This is the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. that ties in with like the Marvel Cinematic Universe and with like Phil Coulson and all that stuff.
Oh
right?
yeah,
Okay,
Phil
so that
Coulson,
show. Okay, right.
Melinda May.
Right. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and of course we're giving their character names.
Right. Yeah,
Mac.
yeah.
that
Clark
guy.
Gregg, I think, is Phil Coulson's actor name.
Yeah, yeah, and so. So I want to preface this by saying, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. spirituality, that everything I see is through a spiritual lens. I guess if you were an interior designer, everything you saw would be with that lens.
Yeah, every time I watch TV or watch a movie, I'm processing the music and I can't turn it off.
Oh, actually, you know what? I was watching something last night and I was like, I gotta talk to Dave about this soundtrack. This music is killing me here.
Do you remember what it was?
Yeah. Oh, the show. Yes, it's called Queen of the South. It's about a drug. It's about a woman from Mexico who basically leads a drug cartel.
Okay. And the music was
intense,
really okay.
But it was good. It really added a layer of depth to the show. So interesting effects, a lot of pedal tones as well. So yeah, I think whatever our life experience, whatever our education and career is, the lens that we end up seeing through as we're watching movies and television, like you're saying. You see it like like a composer and a producer.
Absolutely, yep.
So over the years, I've done several studies of movies and television and different shows. I've done in-depth studies on The Wizard of Oz, on The Matrix, and all of the shows. I'm realizing there's a theme. Another show movie that I loved. It's a really old movie, and I think it was Val Kilmer's either first or one of his first movies. It was called Thunderheart.
Okay.
And Val Kilmer is in there with Sam Shepard, and he plays an undercover FBI agent going on to the Indian reservation, actually the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota. And in the 70s, what actually happened is there were murders happening on the Indian reservation. And so this movie is based on a true story. And there's also a documentary made about that called Incident at Oglala, which is also a very interesting documentary. So what I notice about all these movies and all these shows is there does seem to be a theme. And the themes are many. Dave, are you with me on this?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I was pulling up the trailer for Thunderheart to put in the notes.
Oh, let's do that.
Yeah.
I want to have that. So thank you for doing that. Again, it's old, but it's cool. It's a really cool movie. Also, Graham Greene, probably the most well-known Native American actor, is in that as well.
Yeah.
So we're starting out Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. spirituality, and I'm not sure where to start other than to say the themes. Well, first of all, let me say the themes I notice in the movies I love: Wizard of Oz, Thunderheart, Matrix, even Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., as I've gotten to know, which is a series. It's not a movie. But in all of them, there are moments of redemption. There is transformation, and ultimately what we're seeing in these movies, and especially in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., especially in The Matrix and especially in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., which we're studying today, is the hero's journey. And I wanted to preface a little bit with...
you're talking about like the Joseph Campbell hero's journey thing.
Correct. And you know what? I'm going to get into the basic themes first because if you haven't watched Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., it's really interesting because when I first got into that, to that show, again, I mentioned I was watching it because a member of my son liked it and we're connecting with it. And I'll tell you, actually, for a while, I took him off the show because of his age.
Yeah. It's got guns and fighting and stuff.
Well, I mean, I just don't think an 11-year-old needs to see a torture scene.
Right.
Now that he's 12, he's much more mature. I felt okay with it, but as a kid, I never knew what a torture scene was. So that's really changed in television. But anyway, what I saw throughout the whole series, I did watch all 5 seasons. So I started out, I'm telling you, I watched it for my son and this remember what were they connecting. I was watching it for content. Well, I kind of got hooked, even though there were a couple of the characters like Phil Coulson, who's the main character. He's really the Jesus, one of the Jesus figure,
complete with the resurrection.
I was going to say he even has a resurrection story. Yes. But his affect was so flat. I had a hard time connecting with the character. But what he stood for was really interesting.
Now, did you know any of the backstory that led all into that? Like how he, was in, I think he was in Iron Man, and he was in...
Right.
So you didn't know any of that. You just watched this show.
I watched it cold. And you find that out little bits over the series. So, I didn't know any of that. So I was just starting from show one.
Yeah, and so I started watching it as it was coming around. I think it came out right before Civil War came out. I'm a huge MCU fan.
Yeah.
Me and Shannon, we are gigantic Marvel fans, and so I was really anticipating the show as a carry-on and as a tie-in to the movie universe.
Oh yeah.
And so I can't imagine watching it cold because so much of it ties in. But obviously they write the show for people to jump in and not know anything. But but there were so many Easter eggs and deeper connections to a larger story that if you're really super familiar with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, then it just colors the story a little bit.
Well, I always think that about The Matrix because, the first movie, without the first movie, you could never understand the next two. But there are a lot of people who said they never saw the first one, and I was I can't imagine.
Well, and they also continued the story of The Matrix in the Animatrix, which was a direct-to-DVD thing that had all these different shorts, as well as the Matrix video game. There were scenes shot... Mm-hmm. that only exist in the video game, starring all of the actors. It's all the same quality, but they're just like cutscenes from a video game that's now long since dead,
Oh, that's interesting.
And so you can find all that stuff on YouTube and everything, but that doesn't mean that you have to have watched those movies. Good screenwriters, they will make sure that they can get you up to speed a little bit, so you won't be totally lost. The only thing I think the Marvel movies kind of abandoned that later. They figure if you're watching Endgame, you probably need to have seen at least something before.
Exactly.
I don't think they cared about, previously in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. They didn't do anything like that.
And if you don't mind me saying, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., there are so many things copied from The Matrix. And virtually any kind of sci-fi adventure, thing has borrowed heavily from The Matrix. I mean, the Matrix was such a groundbreaking movie in so many ways. The cinematography, the photography they used, in all the filming. And so I kept seeing that, I would, if Josh wasn't with me, I'd be calling him or texting him going, this scene is from The Matrix, So that was a lot of fun too. And I think we should probably do a whole show on The Matrix. Maybe see if we could get the Wachowskis as an interview. That might be really cool.
That would be stellar.
So in looking through my lens of spirituality, and we already mentioned that Phil Coulson, who is he's both the daddy and the Jesus figure in the show Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., that I see everything through a spiritual lens. And so I saw many biblical characters, and it's basically the archetypal characters. And so that's what some of the Joseph Campbell work teaches us about the hero's journey, is that these are archetypal figures. And so I think it's why we connect so deeply with them and have an understanding of them. And Joseph Campbell's book, I think, was written in the 40s.
It was The Hero with a Thousand Faces in 1949.
Yeah. And we studied Joseph Campbell in ministerial school, actually. And I'm not sure when, it might have been then that I discovered that all the Star Wars movies were based on the hero's journey. So it continues to be a learning for me as life moves forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because there's a depth to Joseph Campbell's teaching. So in general, the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. spirituality, I just found myself brainstorming on the themes, and there's themes of love, of friendship, really loyalty that goes beyond a normal loyalty. It's a hero's loyalty. the idea that we um, both create family and that there's something very special about knowing where you come from. They went to great lengths, many of the characters, to find or discover or investigate their origins, especially the one character.
The sense of and the theme of found families or made families is really prevalent in society right now. And it makes you wonder, okay, what's happening in the culture?
Yes.
Because movies and art is just a reflection of whatever's happening in the culture. And so if you look at, if you look in the 1940s and 1950s and we start seeing like Godzilla movies coming out of Japan, which was a direct reflection of the fallout of Hiroshima and everything, and how is Japanese culture reacting to that? Well, it's big giant monsters,
right?
Destroying cities. And so all that having been said, I wonder what this idea of found family, made families, like it shows up in, The Matrix, is part of that. Also, the Fast and Furious, that's what that whole thing is about, made families. And if you look at like ensemble cast TV shows, whether it's Big Bang Theory or Friends or something like that.
Even Seinfeld.
Yep, it's all about creating family within the friends that you have, and it really becomes a familial unit. So, what do you think? What do you think that's a reflection of?
Well, that's interesting too. Well, as you were talking, I was thinking too. All the CW shows, Flash, Arrow, which I watched all of every season of those. All those superhero shows, those all have that theme as well. And I think what I really believe that harkens back to is we have no tribal connections or customs. We have no connections to our indigenous past.
Do you think that's a reflection of fractured social climate and political climate, or do you think that's because America in its roots is a non-ethno state?
Yeah, I think it's all of those things. I think, America, in its beginnings, if we go back to the First Nations people, was nothing but indigenous. But with the the influx of the white culture, obviously that was lost over time and continues to be. And so I think the disconnection from the land and from the responsibility to the land, and then the fractured family systems. We see so much addiction, so much abuse. All those things are fracturing what should be, healthy family systems. And tribal systems have with them a strong sense of family, a strong sense of safety in the unit. And if anyone... And by the way, these are gross generalizations, but I've studied deeply about tribal systems and indigenous ways. I even went as far as being a part of a school where we studied this in Canada, and all of our classes were out in the bush, and we were living off, of either found, killed, roadkill was our meals. But there's this huge disconnection from the land and family. So what I started to say is, this is a gross generalization, but in tribal systems, if one abused one's own people, they were banished from the tribe. And now because they didn't abide by, the cultural standards that were decided on. So, when you think of a family system, and now, a lot of those ideas are non-existent unless there's been a lot of really deep personal spiritual work. You know what I mean? So I do think all those shows are showing people trying to find their connection. I think that's what gangs are about. Gangs are people trying to connect because either they've been abused, outcast, forgotten about, ignored, in their families of origin. So they find somewhere else to connect and something else to do. So, yeah, I think that's all I think it's all related to what we're seeing. That's a really deep question.
Yeah.
we could do the whole show on that one question.
Family. Yeah.
I hope y'all are staying with us. I find this interesting, and Dave and I both love shows and movies, and it's fun to talk about because I think we all, when we're watching something, we're connecting our lives to it. We're connecting with certain characters. We We might even get inspired. We might be touched. And so that's really why we're doing this today.
Growing up in California, we were far removed from extended family. I've talked about this on the show before.
Yeah.
And so, your friends, your church family really become that. You have the exact same type of bonds. I mean, I have the same feelings for some folks back in Memphis that I do from, my sisters.
Oh, yes. And sometimes they're even closer because they're chosen. We often call that chosen family, right?
Right.
Well, in my family, and in some of my extended family, in situations where there's an only child, it's real common now for them to have really best friends that they call my sister or my brother, because they kind of adopt one another because of this desire, to connect and know have more intimate relationships as friends, that it goes beyond a friendship. Friends that have been there for years do become your family, your chosen family.
That's right.
Yeah, so I think this idea of family, and even the idea of destiny in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and there were a couple of shows where they went in depth into even talking about soul, and that inner depth really came from the character Mac. He had this really strong faith that was really based in Jesus, and then one other character as well, the woman who became his girlfriend. I can't believe I'm spacing on her name right now. He always called her Yo-Yo. She was the woman that would run really, really fast, and like between heartbeats could go across the room and back. But Matt called her Yo-Yo, and they both had a really, really strong faith. And in one of the shows, Yo-Yo even gave Mac a cross to represent his faith, to wear. But there was this really strong sense in the whole show about destiny, especially because there was time travel in some of them, and it was like, well, can we change time? And what they, of course, found out was, yes, we can, because each choice creates a different timeline.
Right.
So in other words, the power of our choice is what decides destiny. Like, destiny's not what we often heard in church about some predestination. And in fact, what we find on the soul journey, on the spiritual journey, as we discuss it, is that destiny is decided, by the choices you make. And so we're going to talk more about that and a little bit more in depth into the show when we come back. I can't believe it's already time for a break, friends.
We'll return to the program in just a few minutes, but first, we wanted to give a special word of thanks to our podcast partner, CCU Orlando, who has helped make this episode of the Authentic Spiritual Journey possible. CCU Orlando is a welcoming community dedicated to transforming lives, celebrating diversity, and supporting soul growth. CCU Orlando is located at 771 Holden Avenue in Orlando, Florida, with Sunday services at 9 and 11 a.m. You can stream services live online as well as learn more at christchurchunity.net. We'd also like to thank Natural Awakenings Magazine of Central Florida, Greater Orlando. Each month, Natural Awakenings magazines across the country take a practical look at the latest natural approaches to nutrition, fitness, creative expression, personal growth, and sustainable living. Natural Awakenings magazine is a free publication and is available in selected stores, health and education centers, healing centers, public libraries, and wherever free publications are located. You could learn more, including advertising opportunities for your business, by calling 407-628-0705. And finally, we'd like to extend our special thanks to Unity of Nashville, a sister ministry of CCU Orlando. If you're searching for a like-minded church community and a personal connection that supports your heart and mind in the Central Tennessee area, then join Unity of Nashville at 10 a.m. every Sunday morning at 5125 Franklin Pike. For more information, head over to unityofnashville.org. And now we return you to this week's episode of The Authentic Spiritual Journey with your host, Reverend Cynthia Alice Anderson.
Hello, friends, and welcome back. We are in the show, in show 62, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Spirituality. And it's so funny because several shows ago, we kind of joked about doing it. And I have had a lot of fun thinking about studying and noticing the themes, and it didn't really take much study because of how I I tend to view things, as I mentioned, shows and programs through a spiritual lens. And this idea of destiny, I want to keep talking about just a little bit because there's often this idea in culture that when we're born into a certain situation, that we're just stuck there and that there's nothing we can do to move ourselves out. And so what I noticed over and over in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is that each character really had many opportunities to choose what their destiny was going to be. Like they struggled with it. They had, moments of doubt for sure. But then there was a choice point that then led them forward into a new consciousness or new way of being. And what I loved about it in particular, and I think it's why I've heard now there's a 6th season coming out.
Yeah, there's 7 seasons,
Seven
actually.
seasons, okay.
Yeah, I think they're about to start their 7th season.
That there's some staying power because the characters develop. In some of the shows, like I think Friends is one of those shows, the characters never really developed, in my view. They just kept kind of recycling the same material.
It's like, that's not to say that the characters don't change. Like if you look at Joey in the first couple of episodes, it's like, man, he's really kind of a jerk and kind of a misogynist, but later he's just a bumbling player or whatever.
Yeah, right.
And so it's not to say that characters don't change, but I know what you mean. They don't really develop. There's no arc to their character.
There's no arc to their character, and especially what I noticed in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. that each moment of choice, and some of them were, really like, I am choosing this. It wasn't like you had to figure out there was a big soul choice. They knew that they were choosing destiny. Like one said, there was I think it was in season 5, into 4, into 5, where these themes really picked up. And it was when there were all these Inhumans coming into the show. And, they were each person, because they were a human, but then had these special powers that
basically like mutants from X-Men, but they didn't. They couldn't use the term X-Men because Fox owned it. But now Disney owns it, and anyway,
right. So they had to figure out what to do with these powers, and so what they started coming to over the course of the show, with facing the villains and the different challenges, is that each Inhuman had a real specific purpose. And the one that was one of the characters, who was Daisy Johnson, who became known, she was Sky, then she was Daisy, and then she was known as Quake. Mm-hmm. And she's really the central female character.
Correct.
That she, excuse me, the guy that was her boyfriend, also an Inhuman, his destiny was to save Daisy. She thought she was going to die when in fact it was him. And so there was this real idea, but destiny wasn't happening to them. They were choosing it and realizing their purpose. And so there was, what I liked about it is it was a lot of power in that choice. They were saying, well, what's my destiny? What's my destiny? And then they said, oh, this is my destiny, and then made a choice. Yeah, I loved that in some of the themes.
Yeah, I was watching it pretty faithfully because of all the tie-in to the MCU and everything. But after the Inhuman stuff, I just kind of, I never
it was a
back
little
up to it with it, know. But I heard it really kind of ramped up and got cool. Like I remember with like Fitz and Simmons, right? And they were like underwater in a bank vault or something, and
oh yes,
right. And I'm like,
Fitz ends up getting brain injury.
Yeah, and then so that was the whole will they, won't they, Ross and Rachel kind of dynamic. I'm like, I'm kind of tired of this, I guess.
I know it did get. It was you had to kind of stick in there through, and I almost clicked off on some of the Inhuman stuff. I'm like, okay, some of this was just fun and fantasy, but this is just downright, I don't know,
stupid.
Yeah, but then I was glad I stayed in there because of the themes that came forward. Destiny being one, and the other one that was really strong towards the end was the theme of forgiveness. And we just had a pretty deep show a few weeks ago on forgiveness, and so as you listen to our show, you'll see that that's a theme that does carry forward over time. And the idea of forgiveness is really, just releasing that old toxic energy. And in the show, what happened when there was this forgiveness, you saw a change in the character that did the forgiving. Whatever anybody else was doing was kind of secondary, but again, what we saw is the character that was able to forgive was suddenly free to move forward.
Which is exactly what we've been talking. Forgiveness isn't for the benefit of the person you're forgiving. It's for your benefit.
Right. And as we've talked about karma, you may remember that, karma's a real thing. And so even if I forgive someone, they still are dealing with the impact, the effects of their actions, knowing that every action has karmic implications. So if there's someone in my past that I'm forgiving, well, then that's about me and my karma. That has nothing to do really with them. Anybody who hurt me, they have to deal with that. How we'd say it in the South is they got to answer to their maker, and that's all about them. That's all about them. So typically, when we have these negative things happen, we are tied karmically to the other person as long as we hold on to unforgiveness. And so even though forgiveness seems like, because of the old tapes about it, that we're letting somebody else off the hook, it is really letting you off the hook. Mm-hmm. And I can't say that enough. I can't stress that point enough. But that was also a major theme, in the show.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of and I think we're trying to kind of avoid major spoilers, in case you wanted to watch it. So if it feels like we're not being very specific, I think that's why. But I'm trying to think of what character that you're referring to specifically, or if
on the forgiveness.
Yeah.
Well, I think it was in the last season.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it was more in the last season. I don't think you saw that.
I haven't gotten up to there yet.
But and I think in forgiveness, it was really to not let anger and rage just completely, control you. And also, some of the forgiveness was self-forgiveness, coming to peace with the decisions you had to make at a very tough time. Maybe it was the right decision, maybe it wasn't, but just coming to peace and having self-forgiveness that I made the best choice I can with basically impossible odds and circumstances. And that's all one can do, is make the best choice that we can find. So I think that came through also in both, in several of the characters, but especially Mac, especially Yo-Yo, and then even Daisy, who was, like I say, formerly Sky, and Phil Coulson as well, and even Melinda May. So all the main characters had those moments, I think, of self-forgiveness. When I was thinking about the belief in God or a higher power, again, there were only two characters that spoke specifically that I remember, Mac and Yo-Yo, that talked about their deep faith. But really what I saw, there was a belief in something grander than who they were. There was a belief that something was out there supporting them. And love was the binding force. It was basically that love was greater than any circumstance. And oftentimes in the show, it was their love for one another. The big word too, I shouldn't leave this out, was duty. And that's also something very lost in our culture, I believe.
Why do you think that is?
Well, I think that individuals are so isolated that they don't understand their connection to the whole. I remember in early shows in the first year when we were talking a lot about family of origin stuff that, we were talking about duty to family. How does one take care of one's family? And historically, well, you never moved. Your family always stayed in the same place for generations. Well, of course, we're in a real different, time than that now. And so when families grow up so far, from one another, I think there's kind of a splintering, if you will, and people feel, kind of isolated. I don't know. That's.
I think, and I've talked about on the show before how, like when my sister moved out, when my parents moved to Oklahoma, my sister moved out to Oklahoma just to kind of be around them so that, my folks aren't out there, on their own. And then, when my mom passed, my dad's health started going down. My sister really kind of pushed in and was there. And so part of the reason that, we have Larry and Judy, Shannon's folks, living with us.
Right, right.
And I don't mean this in a pejorative way, but it's out of a sense of family duty.
Right.
I can't just let them, not have a place to land.
Right.
And so Shannon and I are in a position to be able to, and living in a multi-generational household. And I've said this before, it's not without its challenges, but yeah, it's kind of a return back to something that feels, I don't know, I'm kind of processing this thought for the first time. It feels, the only word that's coming to mind is ancient. Like it feels like it's ancient energy to have your parents with you or so close.
Yes, I mean I believe it is, and I think it's duty bound by love. There's certain things we do. We follow speed limits theoretically. We follow the law. Well, we may not do that out of love. We do that so
we don't get a ticket.
So we don't get a ticket and we don't go to jail.
And I guess we want to be safe.
Right. Of course, I was with one of my family members who's a serious drug user, and when I was in the car with him, he kept saying, well, just run the red light. I was like, okay, your whole life makes sense to me now. No, we don't just run red lights, bub, but duty out of love is a completely different thing. And so in the show Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., what I saw was duty to, the idea of S.H.I.E.L.D. Over the course of the show, there was no organization, there was no shield left, but the idea behind it was we are a shield for humanity from evil, from hurt, from pain, from war, from aliens. And so that's what Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. meant. There was a sense of duty to the greater people. But what happened over the course of the show is it was both duty to each other, love is that binding force, and then ultimately duty to the collective. And so a lot of the struggle at times in the last couple seasons for sure was, well, is my duty greater to our leader, Phil Coulson, or to the larger? How do I choose? And there was a major choice at the end of season 5. And again, the timeline did get changed and all of that. So it was a choice well made, I thought. Yeah. But it was duty to the larger that was that was the struggle. Is it duty to one or duty to the whole? And so, but both, though, all the sense of duty I saw in the show from the positive characters, in other words, the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. characters, was always duty out of love. There was the shadow side that was, I can't believe I'm forgetting the name of, like Agent Ward. What were all those people a part of? Hydra.
Yeah.
The Hydra agents, their duty, basically was to evil. And so we had this kind of quintessential, light against dark, the whole series. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's probably, I guess, about 10 or 15 years ago. I'm really into movies and everything. And so I always processed spiritual concepts through like movies and like scenes in the movies and themes and that kind of thing. And I used to, they used to feel kind of childish to me. And I used to feel kind of immature for thinking that way, because I would always connect like, hey, this is a spiritual truth or a spiritual tenet. And I see this reflected in movies. And so that's how my brain connected that. And so I shared that with someone at a it was actually like a faculty retreat for Visible College, and she her name was Paul Ann, and she gave me permission. She's like, no, stories have long since been a way to communicate and process truths, specifically spiritual. I mean,
absolutely.
There's a reason Jesus spoke in parable.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
It's so that people can relate to a truth beyond legalese and beyond high language.
Yeah, beyond a mind study. Yeah, it's a soul connection. Oh, most definitely. And I think there were so many stories of redemption and salvation in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. that these are such archetypal energies, ideas, and so when like as we mentioned at the beginning, that Phil Coulson, we said, well, he's both the daddy figure, but he was also a Jesus figure because he actually had a moment of resurrection. And actually, so did, I wasn't thinking of this until just now, but so did Sky, who became, her real name, Daisy Johnson, and then was later known as Quake.
I mean, and Coulson's character was actually killed in the Avengers movie.
Yep.
Right. And so that was one of the first season, one of the big things, and one of his big secrets was how did he come back and how did all that work, and Project Tahiti and all that.
Project Tahiti, yeah. Yeah, alien blood.
Yep. Aliens. I mean, it is a sci-fi show.
It is a sci-fi show.
You have to get on board with that.
Yeah, you have to just be able to, there's something, too, about having some childlike wonder still be in your soul to be able to go into some of those shows, because it really takes you out of the mundane and just kind of blows you into a whole new realm of thinking and ideas. But what I've discovered, the further I've delved into spiritual ideas, and I've worked with different healers and people that deal with other dimensions, that a lot of that is not very hard for me to believe anymore. I know there are many things and many dimensions and worlds that just because we don't know about doesn't mean they're not there.
Right.
So I think...
makes me wonder what you would think. Have you seen Doctor Strange?
No. That's next for me?
Absolutely, because they talk about chakra and all of that stuff.
Oh, okay. I'll have to see that.
Astral projection and...
Oh yeah, that's
you totally need to see Doctor Strange.
Well, the character we haven't talked about at all that I want to lift up and mention is Melinda May. Melinda May was in that was her character name. Dave, tell me her.
It's Ming-Na Wen.
Yeah, Ming-Na Wen. What an incredible, beautiful actress, fighter, warrior. She was really that feminine warrior. Teacher guide. And I wondered if, I only wondered this after I was going over my notes, and I said, is there a Mary Magdalene in there? But it was actually, I don't think so, because she was more of an equal to Coulson, even though ultimately he was her boss. They ended up really being, especially by the end, equals.
Yeah, and they have a ton of history,
do.
That kind of gets slowly unfolded as the show progresses.
Yeah, so it was kind of a masculine, feminine, like archetypal outplaying of this savior energy, because not only, did, as we mentioned, Phil Coulson have a resurrection story, Melinda May had many stories of saving others, so that was a really potent theme, and she had a really strong character, I would
think that the Mary Magdalene figure would be Adrienne Palicki's character, whose her character name I'm totally, Mockingbird. Do you know who this is? The actress.
Oh, yes, the blonde hair. I'm spacing on her name too. Yes,
she's gone on. She's like on the Orville now.
Yes. That's probably true. Well, and what gets interesting when you are laying this spiritual understanding in these, kind of, especially in these superhero stories, it's not going to follow necessarily a biblical narrative. But what you see is these archetypal figures.
Exactly.
Right. And so, like, when I thought about, the scientists, Gemma and Fitz, they really represent mind and order. And so, but they always, too, were really blowing past old ideas. They were just... I think archetypally they would be considered the magician, the miracle worker,
right.
So there was a lot of that as well. And ultimately, which we haven't even talked about, and I guess we just weren't supposed to go super deep on that, was the hero's journey. But if you've never studied hero's journey, I would really encourage you to, because in the hero's journey, there's always a call to adventure, and then there's, challenges, and then there's there's supernatural aid that comes in to help you. But there's always transformation, and there's always a return to serve the greater good. and a return to serve your fellow man. And so, like we saw that big time in the Star Wars, as Luke left, his family, or what was once his family, and then of course his helper, when he was on the threshold of his transformation, was Yoda, obviously.
Yeah. And
training him.
Here is the hero's journey, and we'll have linked to this in the show notes. So you have the hero starting out, a call to adventure, usually some sort of aid, a supernatural aid, or a threshold that begins the transformation. Insert a mentor and a helper, then falling into an abyss, which brings death and rebirth, transformation into atonement, and then finally return.
Yeah.
And that's basically, which is so everywhere in literature, in movies. You think of like Lord of the Rings. That's all. All hero's journey. You think of The Matrix. Any movie that we've talked about has some form of hero's journey.
Yes, and it is very cyclical in that, once the call happens, there is a return then to the people, to serve. And so, we often return to this idea that as we individually transform, that we are then a part and can be a better part of expanding and bringing into awareness the greater collective.
Right, and you return changed, though. Like, think about the end of Lord of the Rings, Return of the King. The hobbits returned to Hobbiton completely changed.
Yes,
which was the impetus for Frodo not being able to stay. He has changed so much that he can no longer just kind of continue on to his normal. I know we changed nerd lanes into Lord of the Rings.
That's all right. Well, what I think I want to end with and just have you think about, if your life were a movie, where would you be on the hero's journey? If your life were a movie, where would you be on the hero's journey? Are you living that journey? Are you facing your fears? Are you asking for the right help, when you're on the edge of transformation? So a good friend of mine, I've spoken of him many times on the show, Reverend John, he's from Unity of Nashville. He used to be in the television and movie business, and he used to say, if they made a movie about your life, what would be the title and who would play you? And I just thought that was a very
that is good
telling question. I don't know about the title, but I know Holly Hunter would play me.
Oh, I could totally see that. Absolutely, yeah.
I mean,
the accent and everything.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I'm not sure who would play me.
Yeah, give that some thought.
I don't know, Jim Gaffigan, I guess.
Well, friends, we hope you've enjoyed today's show, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Spirituality. I hope you're like us and you see the spiritual themes as you're watching TV and movies. And we love lifting these up. It's fun for us to do shows like this because this show really is all about spiritual conversations among friends. And we have some really, really intense, deep shows. And I'll tell you, for me, this is just as deep, just in a different way, that I enjoy really discussing these things.
It's just a new way to see God.
It is. It's a new way to see God. So again, thank you for joining us. And again, thank you for those who are supporting us. We've had people begin our doing one-time donations who are not able to do monthly. And then we have other people stepping up to do monthly donations. So we thank you so much for your support, knowing that as you do this, it ensures future programs to uplift you and support you on the journey. So blessings, dear friends, and thank you for joining us.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of The Authentic Spiritual Journey presented by CCU Orlando, Natural Awakenings Magazine, and Unity of Nashville. The Experience of the Soul podcast channel is also made possible through the continued support of our angel patrons, Dove Borland, Peter Gibson, Paul Caswell, J.J. Hamilton, Arlene Meyer, Kathy and Terry, Marcia Mott, and Nora Miles. If you would like to support the channel as a patron on an ongoing basis or through a one-time gift, head over to experienceofthesoul.com/support. And if you enjoy this podcast, help spread the word by sharing it with your friends and leaving a 5-star review on Apple Podcast, Google Play, Stitcher, or the platform of your choice. The Authentic Spiritual Journey is copyright 2019 Cynthia Alice Anderson, all rights reserved. Our theme music is composed by Dave Croft and used with permission. The Experience of the Soul podcast channel is a production of 818 Studios.